We'll move forward here then using RX4 and continue working with the poorly recorded iPhone audio whilst we attempt to make it useful to us. Remember though, as I say, it is a poor recorded file, but as I like to say, you can't expect miracles unless you are using iZotope. So anyway, we left off by looking at combining the clip gain function with the leveler module. Now to save your time, whilst I experimented, I've created a preset of what I think works okay with the audio, so that its volume fluctuations level out to a fairly consistent RMS figure. So this is where I got up to. I'll start off by opening up the leveler, and as you can see these are the figures for the total RMS, max and min RMS too. Now what I've done is, I've set myself up a preset, therefore if I click on the presets drop down there, it's this one here I've inventively called Preset 1. Now what I've done is I've played around with the file and worked out what I think works best. That said, for a little bit more subtlety, I'm going to adapt this slightly. I'll draw down the speed slightly, I'll take it down to half a second. This will mean it will react a little bit more quickly to even out the RMS. Okay, so this responsiveness now is half a second, 0.5 there. Now, in terms of the variation in the amount, I'm going to reduce this a little as well. I'll take it to 3 dB instead of 4 dB. Okay, and once I'm happy, I'll click on here to set the clip gain. So as a result, as we've seen already in the previous tutorial, we now get this undulating line for the clip gain, as RX4 has worked out what it needs to do to either increase or decrease the volume to marry up the average RMS for the length of this file. Let's have a quick listen to this to check it out. Here we go. After a 6-hour drive through the night, Paul Stockton climbed out of a black Range Rover he couldn't ordinarily afford to hire. Hidden under the passenger seat was more than £84,000, a rolled up bundle of papers, and an unloaded gun. On the back seat, purposely in view, was a brand new wetsuit his portly stomach had little chance of fitting. It didn't matter. It was only for show. Okay, I'm quite satisfied with that. Although, to be fair, if I was really going through this clinically, I would adjust the gain down for those silent areas between the sentences. Anyway, for our example here, I'll leave it as it is. I could always gate this out later, should I need to. Even though RX4 hasn't got its own built-in gate, I can use the plugin module to use a third-party gate. Anyway, I digress. As I say, I can do that later, should I feel this is required. Right then, so at this stage, I could simply save this as it is, so that I overwrite the original file. Or alternatively, if I want to create a brand new file from this, well, it's easy enough to do. All I need to do is come up to File, and then down to Export. And as you can see, this will open up this export file dialog, whereby we get 4 choices of the type of file that we want to save. Now I am going to go for a WAV file, although you can see these other 3 options. An AIFF if you are on Mac, or you could save to FLAC or even OGG. As I say, I am going to go for a WAV file. Now I do want to change the bit depth to 32-bit float actually, so that I am working with the best fidelity. However, do notice if you do change it to a different bit depth, 16-bit for example, then you're going to see all these options that you can choose from. You can add in some noise shaping in terms of the dithering. I'm not too concerned about that at the moment. I would leave that right until the end of my processing chain, once I've finished editing the file. I'll click in here too to create a broadcast wave format file, and then also because I want the resulting audio file, the newly created audio file, to open in RX4 for further editing, I'll check in there too. And I'll OK it. I need to give it a name, so I'll call it Document 2 and simply hit Save. OK, all sorted, there's the new file. Now I don't need the original one, so I'll close that one down. Now I will keep this in case I need to go back to it. Although to be fair, I could have saved this as an RX document, which keeps all the different changes and edits that I make embedded within the RX document. Now for my purposes, I will select No. This isn't too critical for what I'm doing really, it's just an example. Now with this new version, I'm not too concerned about seeing the clip gain, so I'll run up to View and deselect it there. However, because my file hasn't been normalized, then that would be my next step. I can do this with the gain module. Of course, I need to make sure I'm on the normalize tab, and I'm going to set this to -0.5 dB for the maximum level. And I'll hit process. OK, the overall volume has increased just slightly so that my loudest transient peaks at -0.5 dB. Now, just for my peace of mind, I'm going to save this by overwriting the original file. Now, my next step in trying to get this audio file to closely resemble as much as possible the original studio recording is to use the EQ Match module. To be able to do this, I need to match the EQ curve from the studio recording and then use that and impose it on our iPhone recording. OK, so that's the principle. First of all, I need to open up the studio recording. Let me just navigate to it. What I'll do is I'll just zoom into one of the areas, although to be fair, I could EQ match right across the audio file, but I want to just use this small area, this sentence or so here. Now actually, although this isn't essential, prior to opening up the EQ Match module, I'm going to save this region, this sentence or so, as a brand new file, only because it makes it more manageable for me looking at it on the screen. It also allows me to show you how to save a particular selection as a brand new individual file. So with this selected area, I can export this selection. I'll come up to File once more, but this time choosing Export Selection rather than just simply export. Once more we see the export dialog. I'm going to use all the same settings as we did a few moments ago, and OK it. I'll give it a name. I'll call it Harrison Drive Extract number 2. OK, there it is. Now I don't need the original, so I'll close that one down. That removes it by clicking on the tabs cross. Now before I do anything else, I just want to play this back so that I can familiarise my ears with what it sounds like prior to using its EQ curve and imposing it on our iPhone audio. He couldn't ordinarily afford to hire. OK, so as you heard, fairly rich in bass frequencies, owing to the fact I was using a better quality microphone in the studio compared to the built-in microphone on the iPhone. Although, as you know, it's always better not simply to rely on your ears. You can also use your eyes, and you can do that by using the spectrum analyzer here within RX4. So I'll run up to View and choose Spectrum Analyzer. Therefore, if I play this clip back a few times now, not only will I be able to hear it and evaluate it in that way, which to be fair is probably more important, but I can also view the frequencies spread across the frequency range within this spectrum analyzer. So let's have a quick listen. He couldn't ordinarily afford to hire. 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 OK, so that's fine. Visually, this is going to help reinforce sonically what I can hear with my ears when I use the EQ Match module in a moment. Incidentally, you don't have to play back your audio when you are using the spectrum analyzer. You can simply place your playhead anywhere along the file's length and you'll see a snapshot of the frequency graph at that point. Anyway, I'll close the analyzer for the moment. And because I want to use the whole of this audio file to match our EQ, I'll use Ctrl+A to highlight the whole of the audio. And then by coming over to the EQ Match module, for such a powerful module, as you can see, there aren't an awful lot of parameters that we can adjust. But I like that, to be quite honest. Simplicity is the key, if at all possible. As you can see that one of the parameters we've got is to learn the profile of this particular audio file, and we can change the amount that we impose, by which this will apply to a different file. So, for the moment, I'll simply click on Learn. And of course this allows us to learn this selected audio file's frequency spectrum, in this case right across the full length of the file. But of course you don't need to do the whole file, although I have done here. Now if you want to use this EQ curve across a number of different files on a number of different days, then you're probably as well to use a preset, save this as a preset, so that you can then use it whenever necessary. In our example here, it's not really that important. That said, I will save it as a preset. I'll let it be called Preset 1. Now for the moment I don't need our original file any further, so I'll close that down, leaving us with the poorly recorded iPhone recording. Now just to remind you, this is what the iPhone recording sounds like at the stage we've reached so far. It's got a much more brittle sound to it, it's much more toppy, even though we have done a fair bit of work with it. I think you'll agree it doesn't sound anywhere near as bad as it did. Anyway, have a quick listen just to remind ourselves. Prior to us using this EQ curve that we've saved from the studio recording. After a 6-hour drive through the night, Paul Stockton climbed out of a black Range Rover he couldn't ordinarily afford to hire. Okay, we're now familiar with it. Let's impose the EQ curve that we've now saved or we've created a snapshot of from the studio recording and use it to impose it on this iPhone recording. All we do, I'm sure you can guess, is simply click on Process. Okay, all done. I'll close down the EQ Match module now, I don't need it any further. Remembering I have still got that saved as a preset should I want to use it on any further audio. Okay, so let's have a listen to hear what this sounds like. Let's listen to how close it gets. After a 6-hour drive through the night, Paul Stockton climbed out of a black Range Rover he couldn't ordinarily afford to hire. Hidden under the passenger seat. Okay, not too bad, although to my ears it does sound a little bit too bass-rich. Perhaps on reflection, I prefer a little bit of that top end, a little bit of that brittleness from the original file. So maybe what I should do is back off the blend between the original file and the EQ curved modified version. Well, that's no problem. I just need to undo what we've just done. Okay then, so once more, I'll come over here and open up the EQ Match module. There is the same EQ curve snapshot, preset number 1. I don't need to redo this. This time though, rather than processing it right across the audio file's frequency range and duration, exactly as this sonic fingerprint was taken from the studio recording, I'm going to use it once more, but back off the amount. So I'm going to blend between the original and the studio modified EQ curve. So I'll reduce this slider from 100% down to about 50%. In fact, I will take it to 50%. Now I'm just guessing that this is going to be okay. Let's try it out. Okay, so I'll hit process once more. I'll close the EQ Match module again and we'll have one final listen. Here we go. After a 6-hour drive through the night, Paul Stockton climbed out of a black Range Rover he couldn't ordinarily afford to hire. Okay, now to my ears that does sound a lot better. There is a mixture of the EQ curve taken from the studio recording and blended in 50-50 with the original bite or the brittleness of the iPhone recording. Okay, so even though it was a guess at 50-50, I think the blend is about right. Of course, this ratio isn't going to work with every single audio file. You're going to have to try this out, the blend there between 0 and 100% with your audio. Now just to finish up, one of the inevitable effects of using this EQ curve and imposing it on our file is the audio level has been reduced slightly, so I'm going to normalize this once more. So once I'm all done, I'll finish up for the moment and I'll see you in the next tutorial.